At the beginning of 2024, I publicly announced that I was no longer practicing astrology. The year before, 2023, was one of the hardest in my life. I had my first baby. My grandma unexpectedly had a stroke and passed away in July. And then in August, I not only went back to work after 6 months and dealing with postpartum, but my mom found out she had breast cancer. And I remember thinking, okay, I have all these tools. I have astrology. I know my charts. I know the transits. I know what's happening right now energetically, and that really should be grounding me, but it wasn't. And if anything, astrology was actually making it worse. I was looking at my mom's chart, who's an Aquarius stellium. A stellium is when you have 3 or more planets in a particular sign. And I was looking at Pluto moving toward her natal moon at the early degrees of Aquarius, and I was spiraling about what that might mean. I became obsessed with the transits. I was tracking them as if they could tell me things are going to be okay. And I was using astrology in a way that I had unconsciously used it for years as a way to get answers, as a way to feel like I had some kind of control over things that were completely outside of my control. And the result was a really deep nihilism. Like, what's the point of any of this? So I set it aside almost completely and entirely. And then I did something that honestly still makes me cringe a little bit. I publicly announced I was no longer an astrologer. Yeah. But what I didn't realize then was that break that I thought was going to be permanent actually gave me the perspective I didn't know I needed. It gave me enough distance to finally see what had gone wrong. And what I figured out changed everything, not just about how I use astrology, but how I teach it and talk about it today. And that's what I want to share with you. Okay, so let's back it up a little bit. Before 2023, before everything I just told you, I had started a podcast. That was in the beginning of 2022. It's the podcast you're listening to now, if you're listening to this on a podcast and not watching on YouTube. At that point, I'd been practicing astrology professionally for a little over a year, and I was genuinely excited about it. I loved it. I believed in it. I really thought that I was going to help so many people with this way of practicing astrology. But also, and I can say this now with a lot of compassion for myself, although it really doesn't feel good to admit, I was treating it like some kind of Da Vinci code. If I could just crack the right combination of transits and placements and timing, I could use astrology to engineer the perfect life. Now, of course, none of this was conscious. But the crazy thing is I was teaching other people the same thing. Astrological planning, electional astrology, picking the perfect moment to do everything based on what the planets are doing. And look, there's really nothing inherently wrong with any of that. I still teach elections. The problem was not what I was talking about. The mentality was the problem, because I had essentially handed over my power to the planets. I wasn't using astrology as a tool for self-understanding. I was using it as an external authority to tell me what to do. And the most fucked up thing about that is I came to astrology as a totally lost individual, as someone who had lived a lifetime of people pleasing, and I really had no idea who I was because I had committed to everyone else's rules for my entire life up to that point. So the irony was thick with this, that I had come to astrology to reclaim my sense of autonomy, and yet I somehow had ended up giving it right back. I was outsourcing my own inner knowing to a system. And then 2023 happened. And when shit really hit the fan, when the stakes were actually high, when it was my mom's health and my family and my own mental health, the cracks in that approach became impossible to ignore, because no amount of transit tracking was going to, for example, tell me my mom would be okay. And I realized I'd been coming to astrology with the wrong question. I was asking, what will happen? When the real question is, what am I being called to learn right now? That is the reframe. I don't think I'm alone in this. This is actually how most people are taught to use astrology. And it's how most astrology content is framed. You've probably had this moment. You know your big three, you're reading your horoscope, you're tracking the transits. Somewhere in the back of your mind, there's this question, how is this actually making my life better? It is really validating to read your chart and get language for an inner experience that you've never been able to articulate. And let's be honest, it's fun to plan it sometimes. I know when I fuck up and Mercury is retrograde, I'm secretly a little grateful. But the question remains, Is knowing that changing anything in your daily life? I think if most people are honest with that question, they'll say no. And they might even say, well, it's making me more anxious. I know if I talk to myself in 2023, that's exactly what I'd say. I think it's because we've been taught to approach astrology as a predictive tool only, as a system that tells us what's going to happen, what we're like, and what our fate is. And let me be clear, I practice a blend of Hellenistic and modern astrology, but certainly my paradigm is rooted in the Hellenistic approach, which was literally about your fate and fortune. It was about what was going to happen to you. And that was the mentality the ancients had, at least in the Greek world, when they came to the oracle. So reason we call astrology an oracle. And I'm not trying to shit on that right now. There's a reason it's been used for thousands of years. What I'm trying to say is, I think that's a limited perspective. I think we can broaden our application of the tool of astrology. I think it's reductive to come to astrology only looking for answers. And I would even go as far to say it can be actively harmful. If you lean more toward the anxious side, 100%, it can really exacerbate what is already present for you. So instead of coming astrology purely for answers, I'm suggesting we come to astrology for context. Astrology is a symbolic, spiritual language. It's meant to be a mirror for understanding the energetic context of your life, the themes, the invitations, the patterns that are asking for your attention right now. And you can't get that by flipping to the metaphorical answers in the back of the textbook. If you come to astrology with just tell me what to do energy, you're not only going to miss the point, in my humble opinion, but you'll also give up your power in the process of asking that question. When you come to astrology for answers instead of insight or context, you give your power away. You make yourself dependent on the external system. And you rely on that to tell you what to do and how to feel and what's going to happen. When you make the shift and you come to astrology not for answers, but for context, when you use it as a tool for self-inquiry and not just prediction, you get something much more valuable. You get a deeper relationship with yourself. So here's how I think about astrology now. I think of it as a map of your spiritual curriculum. Your birth chart is not analogous with a Myers-Briggs or something like that. It's not a personality profile. It's not just a list of traits and tendencies. It is a map of the soul lessons that you came here to learn, experience, and grow through in this life. Not just the patterns you're here to work through, but the gifts you came here to reclaim, the version of yourself you are here to experience. That's what's in your birth chart. And the transits, how the planets are moving through the sky right now, they're activating different chapters of your life story and different moments within your ongoing spiritual curriculum. So when Pluto is conjoining your moon, like it's conjoined my mom's moon, the question isn't, is something terrible going to happen? It's, what am I being asked to transform right now? What about the way I relate to my body, my material circumstances, that which I have to offer because this was her second house? How am I being asked to transform in those areas of life at this time? You can see immediately how the first question and the second set of questions create a completely different experience with the way you engage with astrology. And it's one that I would argue gives you something that's actually useful, because as much as we humans crave control, we simply cannot control what's going to happen. Even if we could say with 1,000% certainty what will happen with a chart, which by the way, we can't. That's another reason I think only coming to astrology for prediction is a problem. We cannot say for certain what will happen. But even if we could, what kind of life would that be? The way I see it, the point of working with any kind of spiritual tool, which I would include astrology in that category, is to live a deeper, more fulfilling, more embodied and expansive life. If we knew everything that was going to happen, it would not make our lives any better. What will make your life better is being intentional about how you respond. See the shift? We're reclaiming our power here because we're taking back our ability to be joyful. Because you can't control what's going to happen as much as we humans crave control, but you can choose how you meet those circumstances. You can choose what you learn from it. You can choose to show up consciously to your own life instead of waiting to find out what the planets have to say about it. This is what I mean when I say astrology is a tool for embracing your spiritual curriculum and not a rule book or an external authority to follow to a T. I think so many of the people who resonate with me in my work are people like me, that recovering people pleasers, recovering codependents. Perhaps you're also sober. There's a reason we vibe. And I think a lot of us really resist rule books because we grew up in strict environments. We maybe grew up in patriarchal religions where we were just told what to do, where we were told how to live and who to be and what we could and couldn't do. We come to spirituality and astrology to not only find ourselves again, but reclaim our lives for ourselves. So why on earth would we turn astrology into another set of rules? We are trying to create our own rules for our life now. And the way we do that is through intentionality. So the invitation, the real invitation of astrology is to use it as a tool for coming home to yourself, for reclaiming your life for yourself, not as another authority to defer to. So now I want to get very practical. You know me, I love to make it step by step. I needed to give you the reframe first though, because that is so important. I really believe a reframe without the tools is pointless and vice versa as well. In order to use the tools to their full capacity, you need to have the right philosophical framing. So here are the 6 ways I use astrology as a tool for embodiment. These are the practices that transformed my relationship with astrology and took it from something that was just making me more anxious to something that genuinely helps me. The first practice is manifesting. Manifesting is one of those words that's been so overused and really just gives snake oil vibes, to be honest. So let me clarify what I mean by manifesting in the context of this conversation. Astrology gives you a map of energetic timing. Different planetary cycles support different kinds of intentions. New moons are for planting seeds, for example. Full moons are for releasing. Venus transits can support intentions around relationships. Mars transits can provide support for speaking up for yourself or doing the hard but necessary thing. Now, I say all of this with a huge asterisk because it does depend on other factors in the chart at that time. You can't just take what I'm saying wholesale and apply it every time. Meaning, not every Mars transit is great for taking hard but necessary action. But generally speaking, you can align your intentions with the energetic weather. And the difference between this practice I'm telling you about and what I explained at the top of the episode when I was trying to hack astrology, so to speak, is here I'm talking about setting intentions about how you will approach that energy rather than saying, here's what will happen. Here's what I'm forcing into reality. That to me is the gross kind of manifesting. The kind of manifesting I'm talking about is co-creating with the universe. So for example, Mars is going to be conjunct my descendant soon. My descendant is, and your descendant too, is in your 7th house. This is a sensitive relationship point in your chart. Now, this is a hypothetical, but let's say I needed to have a hard conversation with someone that I'm close to in my life, the 7th house of partnerships. And I knew this was coming. I've been feeling it bubbling to the surface. And I see this Mars transit come. And I decide that I want to use this moment to have that conversation. And I am going to ask the universe to co-create the conditions to have a productive conversation where I don't get too pissed off because look, it's Mars and Mars is in Aries. So it's possible, right? But I'm setting an intention for how I will proceed rather than saying, all right, universe, this is what's going to happen. Now, you can certainly envision how you'd like it to play out. I think that is an important and powerful part of a co-creation process. But do you see how different the energy is? There's a very different mentality coming to astrology with here's what I'm forcing into reality versus here's how I'm going to approach this and how I'd like for it to go. When you align your intentions with the energetic weather like this and not just setting goals randomly, but actually working with the cycles that we can extract from astrology, something shifts and you start to feel truly aligned. Think about what alignment is. It's aligning inner and outer world, as within, so without. That's exactly what this practice is. And this is how you stop pushing against the current and start moving with it. Practice number 2 is self-reflection. The practice is this. When you read something about your chart or a current transit, instead of just hearing the information and intellectually processing it, you pause and ask yourself, where do I see this in my life right now? How does this energy feel in my body when I sit with it? And what does that bring up for me? Now, you can do this before the transit happens. You can do it the day of, and you can do it after the transit happens. I highly recommend reflecting on the transit after the fact, especially if you have astrological anxiety, because what you'll often find is the way that it actually manifested was way different than your worst nightmare scenario that you were truly worried about. And when you do this, something really profound happens. You can go deeper than your intellect. You can touch base with your soul. And this is how astrology can become an incredibly powerful tool for reconnecting to yourself on a spiritual level. It is truly one of the best tools I know for developing self-awareness. Practice number 3 is aligned action. This is where astrology moves from insight into your actual life. Aligned action, as I see it, means using your chart in conjunction with timing techniques like transits to inform the quality of the action you're taking and not just the timing. So, for example, if it's Mercury retrograde, maybe this isn't the time to launch something new, but it might be the perfect time to revisit, refine, and reconnect with something you've already built. If you have a strong Mars placement, understanding how you're wired to take action and what blocks that can completely change how you approach your goals. Or understanding a natal placement, let's say your Mars placement, can not only help you understand what's important to you and what you're passionate about, but also what can get in the way. And that can completely change how you approach your goals. So with this practice, you are not waiting for astrology to tell you what to do, which is the traditional method. Instead, you're using the transits as context for how to show up most effectively right now. Notice that makes it so there are no bad times. It eliminates good and bad from the equation, which kind of also eliminates almost all of the anxiety. If we know anything about astrology, it's true. We're going to see Mars square Saturn, for example, and we're going to have a gut reaction to that. That's probably not going to be good. But what will also happen if we've adopted this paradigm is we will naturally ask the magic question, what am I meant to learn in this moment? If I know that, let's say, Saturn squaring Jupiter from my 7th house to my 10th house, then there's some kind of conflict bubbling or brewing between my partnerships and my career, really broadly speaking. There's something for me to learn in that. What might that be? Maybe I'll need to learn how to navigate my committed partnerships and my public facing career a little bit more. Maybe I'll be really busy. So it'll be very important for me to have some dedicated alone time every day to check in with myself. Do you see how much more empowering that is than going to that same, again, Jupiter Saturn square and saying, what might go wrong? What should I avoid during this time? This takes us to practice number 4, which is shadow work. This one is close to my heart because I think it's where astrology genuinely gets transformational. Your birth chart does not just show you your strengths. It shows your blind spots, your shadows, the parts of yourself that you disown or suppress or have learned to feel shameful about. This completely reframes the hard parts of our chart. Things like difficult placements, challenging aspects, planets in detriment or fall. These stop becoming bad omens or proof that we're never going to have the life we want, which I think is a lot of our deepest fears. Instead, these traditionally challenging parts of our chart can become invitations to do deeper work, to look at the parts of yourself that you've been avoiding and learn to love and integrate them. When you use your chart as a map for shadow work, when you ask, what is this placement asking me to reclaim? Instead of, why am I cursed with this placement? Astrology becomes something completely different. It becomes a map back to your whole self. Practice number 5 is mindfulness. This one is really simple, and it's about using the cosmic calendar to simply stay present. Instead of living on autopilot and just moving through your days without a whole lot of awareness of the energetic context you're in or even how you're feeling on a day-to-day basis, you start to check in. What sign is the moon in today? What does that invite me to pay attention to? What planetary energy is most active right now? And how is it showing up in my life experience? It's a way of bringing more consciousness to your daily life, of treating each day as part of a larger cycle instead of just another day to get through. And over time, you get to build a really beautiful relationship with time itself, where you stop feeling like life is just happening to you and there's just more stress coming down the pipe. And instead, you start feeling like you're an active participant in what's present right here and now. The sixth and final practice is for connecting with Source. This is the most expansive practice. It's the one that I think gets closest to what astrology is really for. Astrology is ultimately a language for the relationship between the cosmos and the human soul, between the whole and the parts of the whole, which are us. When you use astrology consciously in the way that I'm talking about, when you look up at the sky and you feel genuinely connected to something larger than yourself, it becomes a spiritual practice in the truest sense. It's not a system to decode anymore. It's a living, breathing reminder that you are part of something vast, intelligent, and purposeful. And that reminder, that felt sense of connecting to something bigger, is one of the most grounding and orienting things a human being can experience. And to me, that is what astrology is really for. It's not to tell you just what's going to happen. It's to help you feel less alone in whatever is happening and to remind you that there is a deeper intelligence at work in the cosmos and in you. So I did come back to astrology a few months after I publicly walked away from it because I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I love astrology. I've always loved astrology, even as a kid reading horoscopes in my Cosmo Girl magazine in the 90s. And taking that break, as uncomfortable as it was, gave me the space to see what I had got wrong. I had been using it to try to control the uncontrollable, to get answers to questions that aren't mine to answer, and to outsource my own inner knowing to a system instead of using that system to deepen my relationship with myself. And when I came back differently. I came back asking, what am I being called to learn instead of what is going to happen? And that changed everything. My mom is okay, by the way. And Pluto has conjoined her moon. She's been through a lot, and I can see Pluto at work in her life. But the ability to not be afraid of what will happen has allowed me to be more present for her as she's gone through a pretty turbulent time in her life. And while I wish that the things that she's had to experience, like cancer and other things, didn't happen, I know in some way I can't understand. All of this is part of her plan. And I can accept that and be present with her instead of worrying about what's coming next. So in a way, I'm very grateful for Pluto conjoining her moon because it allowed me to reclaim that ability that my destructive relationship with astrology almost took from me. That reclamation, ironically, is what Pluto does, and I would argue it's what all the transits do when you meet them consciously instead of bracing for the worst. That is astrology as a spiritual curriculum, and that is what I want for you. So if you want to start putting this into practice, I have something for you. It's called the 450 plus Cosmic Self-Care Practices Guide, and it is completely free. It's organized by planet, moon phase, zodiac sign, and personal transit, so you can actually use the astrology that's happening right now as a daily spiritual practice. Not just read about it or intellectually process it, but truly use it. And of course, if this resonated, I hope you'll subscribe. I'm back here every Sunday. I'm really getting the flow with YouTube and my podcast again, and I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to leave a comment on YouTube, on Spotify, if you're listening on the podcast. DM me. I'm at dana.solara, Solara, on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. I'd love to know what you want me to make more content about. What do you want me to teach and talk about? What questions do you have about astrology and using it in this practical, embodied way, or about your placements in your birth chart, transits that are coming up, whatever you want to know about. If it's about astrology and personal growth and spiritual self-development, lay it on me. I want to talk about it. In the meantime, I hope you have a beautiful Sunday. Take great care of yourselves, and I'll see you next week. Bye.